as she was the president, was there a faction, that was attempting to? I mean, and I don't know how much she was actually engaged in dialogue about this as a principal issue. When when they have
I think so.
when they have
The volume might be low.
I think it'll be
But
a good strategy. I don't know when they're gonna have the next one. Just a strategy.
Right here.
Yes.
And the mic is
And I know
here.
they're gonna do some regional.
So I don't.
things.
We just got this, and so I'm trying
He's
to figure out the features to have.
he's at Howard, but he's at Morgan.
One of the things I'm sure that she discovered while she was in there, what they will do is they will leave you alone to not create or to not bring that as a question onto the floor.
Right.
While you are in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're not in charge, or while you're in charge, then they're organizing better so that when you're no longer in charge, then they can bring this onto the floor. And of course, they're lobbying and organizing amongst themselves and trying to find allies within that so that when one of them or someone neutral comes to power or Negro comes to power, then they can move on that.
Right.
So they're already ready. And this is an attempt to make sure that once they come to power, that there's no chance of anybody else returning who's got an issue with that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that you see at a lot of the schools where you have African-centered, or maybe I need to say quote-unquote African-centered scholars who have issues with homosexuality, but the effort by the homosexualized African community is very politicized. So they have identified you as someone who either needs to be brought over, and if you can't be brought over, then you need to be removed. And they systematically work at this, and they get it to a point where when they have the majority of the students, or they have the most vocal students and the most faculty in those positions, then you would be isolated if you said anything. Not only would you be isolated, you would be removed. So I've encountered a number of faculty who have issues with it, but they don't dare say anything because they are afraid for their jobs.
Right.
But to me, that's like complete total lying, because you know that something is wrong, you know that something is up, you know that something is happening with your children who are the students, but you're allowing them to go on because you're afraid of losing your job. That to me, maybe I'm crazy on this. That to me is nonsensical. I mean,
What's interesting?
You're supposed to be answering to your ancestors.
Now, the type of information that we'll hear about the most, I don't want to say, militant brothers and sisters on this era. Like, white folks won't say anything about them too much, But the moment you say something about somebody being gay or lesbian, and it's like, oh, how dare you say something about, homosexual? You're homophobic. It's like almost worse than saying something about white folks that would be true in the context of what they're talking about, but never. It's almost like never say anything about anybody that's homosexual. Never speak on that, because if you speak on that, then it's like it's worse than being quote unquote racist, as they would define somebody that's militant and nationalist.
What they have done is they know who they are. They know what characterizes them. So what they have done is to systematically infuse that into African people, particularly those who are closest to the Yoruba, and then disconnect that from being European. So when you attack somebody for that, then that battle wins for Europeans. If I attack this person for being quote unquote homophobic, which is a major misnomer, but if I attack somebody for being homophobic and I'm able to win that battle and make African people homo friendly, then I made them more European friendly because Europeans are homosexual. So it's
like a layer cake.
Yeah, absolutely. But you put those traits on other people and then have them fight over those traits with you feeding the side. It's the same thing you do when you go into a country and you want to control the country and control the government. Or you put in this revolutionary force, or you put in a puppet government to serve you, and they win, so you win by default. So as homosexuality goes across and raises his power and becomes more legitimate and all the rest of that through us, then it gives them more power and less things for us to look at them and see and understand that they're different and be able to attack that with. If there's no distinction between us and them, which is a point I was trying to make to this brother weeks ago. In fact, a major writer on the continent. Right. I wasn't trying to make it to him. I was trying to make it about him because our conversation was over. But the point for me was this individual had a problem with the homosexual book. Right. But this is supposed to be revolutionary. So if there's no difference between Europeans and us, then the only thing that we're doing is we're upset because we're not in charge. So we're trying to fight to get what they have. If there's no difference, if there's nothing of substance that distinguishes us from them, then what's the fight over? The fight's over us being mad because they whipped our behinds. That's it. That's it. And we just want a bigger piece of the pie.
Right. Now that's you have to be clear with people that it's much bigger than that. You know,
absolutely. It's much bigger than that. And they try to compartmentalize it so you end up with these little firefights. That's why I don't get into debates with people about homosexuality. I immediately say, well, you need to read one book, you need to read Rural Units, you need to read Sex Imperative, you need to read War on the Horizon, you need to go read, these books, and then come back to me. But of course, they don't want to do that.
Right.
They absolutely don't want to
summarize your argument.
And you can, if you don't know what you're talking about, or your argument is based in what you want, because you're trying to validate yourself and make yourself appear correct. Yeah. Then I can't defeat your argument. I can't change your mind. Just like when you come to a lecture, you didn't come because you wanted to think better. You came because you wanted to hear the speaker say what you already believe.
Let me ask you something. Okay, this is a phenomenon because I don't read much about homosexuality. I kind of observe and I see. So I don't really know.
Probably start driving you crazy.
All right. So one thing that I noticed is that black men homosexuals, or the interesting part about black men who are homosexual, the one interesting thing is
black men homosexualized.
Right. The thing that I find intriguing is that you'll have a black man who has taken on this character, this personality that is highly feminine, and very, very, very like flamboyant, very, very, very with a inflection in the voice and a mannerism in the hands and a mannerism in the body motions, right? Okay, this is a I don't want to say a stereotype, but it's a template, and you see this all over the country. Okay, now when you go to other countries and other cultures, and you try to observe what is homosexual in these other countries, if it does exist, you don't see that template of homosexuality, the flamboyancy, the neck rolling, the inflection of the voice. If you find somebody that's homosexual in, say, I don't know, Asia, they don't have that same style. So, what do you think about that template that black men assume, in terms of that? When one looks at homosexuality on a global scale, like the differences between a black man that has assumed this effeminate role versus going around the globe and seeing other types of what people term homosexuality. And I believe that it's different. Different styles of I don't see different styles of homosexuality, but it's different when you look at a man in different cultures and their homosexual behavior. The black man's thing is so overly like gender role reversal, or what they assume a woman is to be, them adapting their behavior to that.
Well, you get different cultural historical context. African men in this country have African women too, but this is different. African men have been under a particular type of assault. European males, men, they see war as war between men. So you have to remove the men in order to win the battle. The reason why you see this flamboyancy, all the rest of this taking on the characteristics of a white girl, not of a white woman, but of a white girl. You see this because these males understand that their survival, their ability to um, be able to believe that they have some power, if you will, in this world, is them becoming more like girls, more like women, if you will, than being men. In these other places, your manhood's supposed to be secure. So it's just a matter of you taking on some kind of asexual behavior, modeling yourself. But here, there is a historical context that goes with that, an historical context of systematic oppression over here. So you've had, over time, a group of men who have systematically looked for ways to be less of a threat to European males. So you've moved from shuffling to Negro to sleeping with the enemy to now homosexualized males to feminize particular female. This is consistent efforts to try to be. They don't realize. Who was it that said it's not Nathan? Yeah, he said it's not your clothes you don't. Something. It's not your clothes they don't like. It's not your voice they don't like. It's not how you drive they don't like. It's you they don't like. So these guys don't realize it, and they're trying to make themselves acceptable. Okay. To me, the most obvious example of that, or coming face to face with me with that, at the University of Chicago, they had these colloquiums, which were like dinners where all of the black students would come together with their suits and ties on, I'm in such and such a class, and we were the senior graduate students there, so everybody knew us, but we didn't really know them because we didn't spend time on campus. So went into this room, and I noticed that the fellas over here, sisters over here. This reminded me of the kindergarten nursery school dance, Right. So I don't remember where she went, but I went to talk to the sisters, and I said, "How you doing?" Blah, blah, blah. They were, all excited to, see me. They hadn't seen me before. Good conversation, and they were telling me about what they were doing in school and all the stuff that was racist and all the rest of this. And I said, "Well, this is really strange. How come the women over here and the men over here?" And the sister said, "What men?" And I didn't take it personally because she wasn't talking, to me. She was answering my question. I didn't take it personally. So I said, "Let me take my leave." And I walked over to the fellas. How y'all doing? And I got angry. So we left. Went back to Mary Student Housing. I went down the hall to Jimmy Shiner's, and Jimmy Shiner was my buddy. Brilliant. And asked him, "What's with all these fags?" He said, they're not fags. He said, they are feminized. He said, they are working with all their might to remove all signs of aggression because they know that this intimidates the white boys and they want to be part of those circles.
Oh, wow. So that's why, okay, you will have these men that'll be like at Vanderbilt and these different colleges. And I've met me.
Yeah, metrosexual.
That's a major part of it.
Yeah, and like I couldn't, people always said this one brother that I knew was gay, right? And I never really had verification. Never asked him because I was always on the place like, well, if you're working in the community, and you're diligent, you're a teacher, you're doing your work. I was like, I never wanted to be like that confirmation of yes, you are, and then I had to be like, damn, you know what I'm saying? Because he's a good brother, a lot of knowledge, and he was new on the scene. So, come to find out a little bit about him, Ivy League schools and things like that. So that explains a lot. Like, that is a culture amongst these white universities where if you're a brother that the hyper-militant, if you're proud of your heritage and you're, assertive, then it's like, what's wrong with you? You know what I'm saying? You can't really carry that type of energy.
Well, can I just throw in a quick comment? My I understand what you were saying. You didn't want to find out. If he was working around boys, you guys needed to find out.
Right.
Because if that's an illness.
That's right.
And that illness can be passed on to our children. And if there's a question, he shouldn't be around the children.
There was a brother that was a teacher there that had a huge falling out with him over that, and I think the administration of the school, at the time were kind of okay with it, and they kind of didn't challenge it. But the brother that was like that's not the way to go. You know, he ended up leaving. You know,
And that's what happened.
he ended up leaving because it's like, I can't have these my be around this and seeing the kids
My conscious.
assuming that assuming that position, or at least thinking that type of uh, uh, interaction with the world, in terms of being a man, that would be something that they would model, and this is so intriguing. Like, this conversation is so intriguing because as I've been evolving and studying, like, the gender role thing is something that I keep getting thrown up against because I run into sisters that's lesbian, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so don't leave them out.
And it'll be sisters that'll be on point with, I met one sister that was like 23 in college. She was from Panama, and she was like, I'm a Garveyite. And I was like, oh, really? And I saw she had a tattoo, of the red, black, and green flag, and one God, one name, one destiny on it. I was like, oh, so you're a Garvey? Okay. So we, talking, she becomes a volunteer for the festival and everything. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to bring my girlfriend. And I was like, oh, okay. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't like, like castigating against it because, she was a worker. So I knew that she was, down to support. I was like, all right, okay, that's cool. But later conversations, I was like, so what's going on with this? Have you ever been, in a relationship with a man? And she was kind of like, I don't want to be defined by what, people say it's supposed to be a woman. I don't, have to be, that type of thing. Like,
That's the European
that's a new
way.
definition. That's like, I'm a woman, and if I find love in another woman, that is, it's very, esoteric, not very agape type.
Just
But
line them all up.
and so it was weird for me because and when I challenged it, it was like almost like as if, okay, because I'm not challenging it with any type of documentation. I'm like, this is like, let's go basic. Let's break it down to simple, rudimentary. There's no such thing as an asexual human or any asexual mammal. So if you have a man that wants to have a child, he has to have a child with a woman. He can't split himself off and have a child, through symbiosis or whatever. So that argument on the table, what is the definition of family? That was the rebuttal. You know what I'm saying? What do you define as family? Does family have to be man, woman, and child? Like, well, I mean, that is the basic unit
Not in the West.
of a family, right? And I was like, in our context as African people, we should be even more cognizant. Like, yeah, we don't want to break up that unit because that unit was broken up for us. So we're trying to reassemble these pieces. So how do we take the man out? If you're a woman and a woman, and you have a child by a man, then that man, is he a part of the family? Is he a unit, or is this polygamy, or what is the situation? No, we just, they have sperm donors and all such. So I'm like, okay. So you would just have sex with this man just to have a child, and he's not the father. He doesn't have any interaction in raising the child. So these type of, the conversation was just like, I don't know if she thought about it, but it was just like, I got to the point where I think I was getting, on her nerves, by talking about it, because I'm just asking. I'm just when I just ask questions. I don't, give you the answers. I ask you the question based off of your answer. I ask you another question to just kind of see, how far are you gonna get with how far are you going with it? And it's kind of like she was getting angry. Like, why are you challenging me? Why are you being judgmental? I'm just asking, asking questions.
You end up being the one accused.
Right.
You become abnormal because you're questioning their individuality.
Right.
This is the Western phenomenon. I see so many people, and what she was talking about as a major problem. They know. To me, the perfect example is what happens in churches.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Where they come into the church, make contributions, significant contributions, become a significant part of financial, and then they can make demands.
Right.
And then they force the church to change. So when we look at it, we have to understand this is political. They have no business near Garvey. They have no business near wearing a John Henry Clark shirt. John Henry Clark was clear. But what they will do is, like with the spiritual systems, they will come in and pretend that they don't know that there's a problem with this. And once they have a foothold, then they will show themselves for what they are. But it's too late then.
Right, because they're already in it.
You're already my friend. You've already proven yourself a worker. I already know that you know the stuff.
Right.
We can't. It's, I guess for me, it's a thinning out process where there are a lot of people who have information There are Europeans who have read our story,
Yeah.
but they're bound to what we have in there. But we will allow Africans who, in every way, shape, form, or fashion, except for the color of their skin and the texture of their hair, who will think and act as Europeans, and we will allow them to stay because we are so loving. We consider them to be family, and we will allow them to get away with stuff. That allowing them to get away with stuff, and this is a major thing for us because this is a process of attrition. What they do is they find the organization that does not have them in it, and they begin to infiltrate that organization and assume, whether they believe it or not, the political philosophy of that organization. And then at the right moment, whatever that may be, then they reveal themselves, and it creates all kinds of chaos within that organization. And usually, like the guy at the school, the ones who
are strong,
they will leave because they don't want to be associated with that.
Right.
And then you have the leadership or whoever is associated with that. They say, "Oh well, this is a good worker."
Right.
Okay, regardless of whether he or she is touching.
And you already lost the other teacher, so it's like
Period.
you can't just kick out both teachers. What's the another thing I want to ask you real quick, like with the Malidoma Some and the Sambafu Some. You know what I'm saying? I really want to get your insight on that because there's another academic that I had a conversation with that was like there is homosexuality in Africa, and that it's something that we had, and I could never find her to have a conversation because the way the conversation came up, I didn't really. I was like, she's not in a. I'm gonna teach you and give you some references mood. She's insulted. You know what I'm saying? It felt like because I sent out an e-blast about PKV, and she happened to be on it, and she was like, "How dare you send this?" Da, 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 da. I was like, "All right, no, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but this is everybody's entitled to their perspective. This is information that these brothers have put together. They have documentation, so check out what they're talking about. I'm not trying to say, I know everything. I'm just trying to pass on the information so people can get more. But she was really really heated about it. What is that other side of the argument? That that homosexuality existed in Africa or on the continent, so that as a result that the homosexuality that men and women practice today should be kind of like we should be okay with it because it was there before we became the Maya Alpha. I guess that's the argument that it existed before the Maya Alpha. So us having a problem with it now is problematic. There's like an error in that argument.
Well, one point before answering that, a lot of these folks want to talk about being open-minded. And for you sending it out, you were closed-minded. But I like to think about it in terms of they're open-minded to European culture and thought. I'm not open-minded to European culture and thought. I'm open-minded to African culture and thought. I have done the research I've done, and there's no evidence of homosexuality in traditional African society before the invasion of Arabs and Europeans. There was none. When you talk to people, our scholars about that, they will tell you they're not going to sit there and run down a whole story. For us, it's common sense. What they're trying to do, because they have been placed in positions of authority, is to just say that this is the case. There's no evidence that they have, and the evidence that they're coming up with is manufactured. Sometimes I really want to hurt people when they come up with this nonsense because they're talking without fact, and I understand why they're doing it. They're trying to bring something into reality that shouldn't be there. Europeans, when they came to the continent, this is one little, to me, evidence. And the evidence, to me, by default, is that there isn't evidence of it. But they want you to prove that there wasn't. How can you prove something wasn't if it wasn't? That's like contradiction. But when Europeans came to the continent, and of course, to me, to say European is to say homosexual. I don't just, and I explain that in the book. When they came to the continent, they hid their homosexuality because they knew how that would impact their relations with African people. You're going to bring pedophilia, which is classic European homosexuality, which is where they're taking us, because they're taking us back to their classic society. When you're talking about classic European society, Greece and Rome, then you're talking about predominantly pedophilia. But they had to take us back in stages, and they've been working on that ever since they enslaved us. But they knew, knowing us, that they had to hide that when they came to the continent. So they had all this literature about African people, and we were this, and we were that, blah, blah, blah. Nowhere do you see in their literature anywhere them saying African people are homosexual. That would have been the first thing.
That's
they
like
were so against it.
You talking about like the Stanley Livingston, like the
Explorers, journals, the explorers, all the writers of Africa. Nowhere did any of them say, except in a couple of cases, but it wasn't homosexuality, it was sexual license. But they were manufacturing this stuff, and even their scholars
interpretation of it was that
and it wasn't an interpretation, it wasn't even there. They were just writing this entertainment, like the monsters with 40 feet and 2 miles long and all the rest of this. It had no basis in reality whatsoever. But nowhere in their scientific literature, nowhere in their anthologies, nowhere in their ethnographies, none of this stuff do you see anywhere where anyone's talking about homosexuality. And if homosexuality was something that Europeans were fighting against so hard, and they were saying everything they possibly could say bad about Africans, manufactured and otherwise, then they would have definitely said that. That would have been all through the literature.
Right, that would have been definitely.
That would have been all through the literature.
You talking about like back when they were saying we were savages?
Yes, and it would have been all through the literature. We would have just been eating each other.
Right.
We've been doing everything else to each other.
That was definitely
so
not.
When the women were, they said we were promiscuous because the way we dressed, which was appropriate for our climate, and you didn't have to worry about men seeing your breast as sexual objects. They interpreted that. Now that was true. Women could go breastless. I mean, with their breasts bare. But that's their interpretation. But yeah, they would have said.
That's a good point. That is a real good point. Like that whole when you read the literature and they say, well, they taught us that we didn't have no history, the dark continent. Like why nobody ever said that, there was Africans that were practicing. Because at that time, for Europeans, homosexuality was not an open discussed topic. And if you wanted to diss somebody really bad, then I'm sure that they
there was a difference in European society. There's always been a difference from effeminate males and homosexual males. Homosexuality was never the issue. Femininity was the issue. The Greeks and the Romans didn't allow feminine males in the military, so they distinguished between those two. So to me, homosexuality was never not a part of their society. It was just not something that you expressed to other people or really spent time talking to, because you don't talk about things that are normal and natural a lot. And then those people who have issues with it, problems with it, and that this is going to prevent you from violating them or invading them or gaining complete control over them, then you don't reveal that to them. What did the African proverb, the bedwetter doesn't let you know that there's a bedwetter if you're going to let them stay in your house. You find out after that person's in there, then it's too late. I always say when I'm beginning the discussion about that, and I think it's very important for us to understand common African sense. You're not going to have a pedophile in a family-oriented society. That's not going to happen. If you love and value your children, you're not going to have a pedophile. I say this all the time. In European, this political process of attrition has waited until certain scholars have gone. They use them like they use Garvey. They use their genius to back up being black, but once this person is gone, they can't defend. Like in the internet now, this move started, and I wrote a essay in Mentalside entitled "Lies, Lies, and More Lies," where they're trying to homosexualize Malcolm X. That's a big movement. That's a big movement. Because if you can homosexualize the most prominent man who stood for yes.
I've never heard that.
Yes.
I gotta look that up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You don't have to look at your email. It'll be circulating again. You'll get it.
It's out there. I would say, well, John Clark said that it didn't exist. Dr. Ben said that it didn't exist. You go through a whole list of our scholars, but they wait until these people begin to die off, if you will, and then their movement comes in, because at the time that they were in place, they didn't say anything. They studied, they organized, waiting until these voices to be silenced, so that then they could take the stage. They moved within the system. In the late 80s, Europeans begin to move revolutionary Africans from the faculty on colleges around the country. And this was a process that took till like the mid 90s. And this was a serious process all across the country. They went through the process of removing. Those who remained either were the old heads who had tenure and whose names everybody knew, or individuals who were never really about us being empowered anyway. They just wanted the job and the prestige and the grants and the secretary. As these people moved out, then the Africans who were brought in were more friendly to European ideas, more friendly to homosexuality, more friendly to integration. And if you look around, you see that the bulk of them are married to Europeans.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, so you can't, and of course, these are African spokespeople. You know, the dream team that they created at Harvard, William Jewis Wilson, Charles B. Willie, Henry Louis Gates, all of them they created in that quote-unquote black think tank. Only one of them wasn't married to a European. So these become our spokespeople. Just like when you're watching TV now, the movies now, and the new black child is not a black child. The new black child is the product of a black and white parent. So this is what black people look like now. They don't look like anybody here. They look like, you know.
Or they look like, even if they're not, like Will Smith and Jada's children, they look like they could have a white parent. So same difference.
So
they don't look like.
Yeah. So they're changing the ideologies that are promoted in these schools, and feminism has been a major force in that. A major force in that. And African women really need to make the distinction. Those who haven't make the distinction between feminism and womanism and motherism. Womanism and motherism, that's the African thing. This feminism, that's just white women who want to take over the role of the white men. They don't want. They want. Okay, you've been in power for this long. You've been able to oppress. We want this now. You need to move. You've had your chance. Look at the mess you created. We want to come in here and do this correctly.
Yeah, but the other piece about it is that we so, caught up in this society, which is a patriarchal society.
Oh,
And so, it's almost like for a woman, it's almost possibly that it's natural for to be like, okay, this patriarchal situation is not where it's at. We come from a land where it's queen mothers. How am I interacting with the chauvinistic brother? You know what I'm saying? Who's like women need to be underneath me and they need to bow down and serve and all that stuff. So
I understand.
So it's almost like that evolution is like the first thing that a sister could grab
head on to that. Yes,
would be like, okay, feminism. You know what I'm saying? Think of Angela Davis.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Who's now sleeping with two white women.
Or Alice Walker.
Yeah, but and it's understandable. That's the same way it's understandable. So many of the leaders who brought African nations out of colonization were Marxists in their politics.
Right.
It's understandable. It embraces the idea of liberation. When we know that, then that means that we have to work toward that African identity. If we understand, and that pretty much lays on the shoulders of African men in many ways, because the chauvinism doesn't come from the women. The chauvinism comes from, the men. So these are things that we have to work on, and it's not easy when you've been brought up in this, and that's the reality that you've been brought up in. But it's something that we have to work on if we're going to turn this around.
Right.
Or like in so many things when I have discussions, either we're going to work on it with all the diligence we can muster, or we're going to say, all right, we lost.
Right. That's a good point. Cause I know sometimes I have a problem because I have a problem with brothers who want the sisters to be in this subservient type of role and because I come from a home where my mother ran, you know what I'm saying, and I'm like, my mom ran it, and I know
my father was there.
Well, yeah, my father.
He said, "Do what you need to do."
Right, so it's like I never really saw a problem with the sisters being in a position of authority. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, and almost to the point now where when I see brothers who be on it like that, like oh no, the brothers need to be up front talking, all the brothers need to be no, and don't get me wrong, I ain't talking about sisters lifting tables. I have a huge problem with that. When there's able-bodied men walking around, I have a problem with the sisters breaking down. Yeah, because it's like, what are you doing? that these sisters is over here breaking down these chairs, but I'm talking about in terms of all roles of programming, organizing, lecturing, speaking, different things. Like, we had to really check that and be like, all right, where are our behaviors in error in relation to where sisters are in reasserting, the way that our family units are going to survive and thrive, and not just survive, but regenerate.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are several good things that I've seen people do in that area. One, of course, you're starting to deal with the boys when they're young, but also you've seen when elders are being consulted, then you consult a male and a female elder. You're not just one or what have you. Also, another area which to me is very important. In our traditions, the women organize with the women, the men organize with the men. So you're seeing a lot of mama's groups and Baba's groups who are all these two groups are connected with the family, but they are working independently of each other.
Like years.
Yeah. And I'm seeing, I know that we are, and I'm seeing other folks teaching about the role of African women in the tradition. Okay, there's a reason why they control the economy. There's a reason why, the first deities were female. There's a reason why all these things happen. The problem with doing that in some cases is that many will go home and that'll be turned over his head by what they see and what they hear. But I still think it's effective because children choose their models. You don't. That's that. I don't even like using the word mentoring, but that's that mentoring thing. If you that rearing thing,
right.
Where Jegnas, they introduce what needs to be done. Where they pick and choose based upon the level of respect that you have, for that, and they study you head to toe. But we really have to correct that. If we do not correct that, and that mentality is real evident in, well, I say all the communities, but for here, it's become a personal thing. She's the administrator of this school. I'm not the administrator.
Right.
She's the administrator of this school. Push come to shove, if we want to go back and look at the discussions that have gone on about this school, this is her idea. Okay? I have no problem with the idea. I think it's a great idea.
Right.
We talk about our traditions. The women would create the idea of what was needed, and the men would go and build it, make it happen. Okay, and there wasn't any, well, this is better than this, and blah blah blah. It's irrelevant. It worked for us. So we have had brothers come here who didn't want to go any further. Had conversations, didn't want to go any further because they had to talk to her about bringing their children here. I said, fine, they didn't need to have their children here in the first place, because then there would be a major conflict, when they went home. Now, when and I don't want, I guess, people to be confused when I'm upset with students here because they've done something in this environment or to this house that they should not have. I'll tell them, this is my house, because then there's a man speaking to them and they know that I'm not playing with them, and she's got nothing to do with it. This is between me and you. You rode on something, you stepped on something, you did something you weren't supposed to do. So this is between you and me, and they understand that just the same way that, and I don't see anything wrong with it. I think that's a good idea. The mother, I heard so many mothers complain, man, I told him to do this like 40,000 times, and he's sitting in hall and blah blah blah. Father comes home and says, do it, and it's done. So that's like what goes behind that. This is my house, because they're clear on, I'm not playing, And to me, when folks come, when folks come and say, well, we want to start a homeschooling program, we want to start a school or whatever, first thing I say is that you have to have brothers there. You have to have brothers there because they're the ones who need to apply the discipline, because that discipline needs to be applied so that the sisters can have a calm, secure place to teach in. I'm seeing more and more boys and girls who have no respect for the sisters, none, boys and girls. And I tell the girls, well, if you don't respect her, how do you expect your daughters to respect you is this.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with the boys. But if you don't have a brother there who they think is crazier than they are, you have serious problem with the school. That's one of the first things that comes out. When we started this school, and still, I do the social studies, she does this, I do the science, she does the language arts and the math. When we started this, it was supposed to be a 50-50 thing. But it ends up now, I'm teaching about maybe 30% of my time, and about 70% is discipline, conversations, talk, blah, blah, blah. Because that's the only way you're going to maintain order. Okay? She's got to be able to do what she does, and she's got to be able to do it without any concern, any worry whatsoever. I teach everybody's got their attention on me. That doesn't mean that she doesn't have to tell somebody occasionally, pay attention, blah, blah, blah. But the bulk of the discipline is me just sitting over here, maybe have my book, maybe working on something, but they know that I'm sitting here for a reason. It's not because I need to be in this room.
Right.
Even with how many in the class? Like 7?
Whether it's if it's
smaller
2,
than that.
if it's 2, they do not have the respect for women. I mean, you look at the videos, look at TV, look at what
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I work for social services
Mm-hmm.
as an eligibility worker. I'm the guy that interviews you for, if you want to get food stamps, Medicaid, or TANF. And so I see kids, in the little area they call it intake, in the intake area, and I'm like, wow, man, these kids is wilding, even in the interview, like, wilding out. And one of the illest things that I just saw, I just been working about 8 months. One girl comes in, for food stamps, and I'm here, you know, she's across the table, and she's in a chair like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, so I'm like, I got my boy right. My boy is like, I was coming out of training, so he was observing me doing my training. He was new too, and I'm going through the interview like, yeah, so what are you here to apply for? I'm trying to get some food stamps. And so she was like, had an attitude the whole time, and so I was like, well, I started laughing. I started laughing like, okay, yeah, all right. Well, this is what you need to this is what you need to sign. And so it was kind of funny. It was funny. She was like 18, she's like 17 years old, but it was funny, but it was not funny. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
I was laughing, but I was like, I can't believe this girl is so
I would tell them. Sometimes I just straight up and tell young people, man, look,
like, yo,
you can't conduct yourself like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just
It was crazy. I was new and I didn't know. I don't even know what the boundaries were, because I'm still like learning what the boundaries are about conversation. Because Lord knows, people like, well, he told me that I was acting immature and da da da, and I'm like, but the reality is that now I'm like, you gotta have those conversations, because the girl, she left out of there and went to the next worker like later on, because I had to deny her and all that stuff. But the next person that she went to, she had the same behavior, just as mean, just as like it almost as if somebody did something to her that was messed up, and put her in a position. And I was like, well, look, you got a baby on the way, where's the father? He ain't around. I'm like, well, what are you gonna do? Is he gonna pay for something for the child? You been with him. And she was like, well, she wasn't trying to sue child support or anything like that from him. I was like, well, you're gonna be on your own, because we can't give you no money. You're too young, you can't get TANF at 17 unless you have to be 18 and not living with your mother. The law for TANF is that if you temporary I'm not advocating anybody go get TANF and shit like that, but I'm just saying that when people go get TANF, if you're 18 years old, you can't get it if you live with your parents. Okay, your parents will have to get it. And then that's a whole nother issue with income and all that stuff. So she was trying to get it like, okay,
She can get it.
she can get it, but she would have to leave. She had to leave her household, go live with her aunt or uncle or something like that. Then apply. So she was mad about that. I can't get no TANF. And then another thing is, like, I see kids that feel like this is what they supposed to. You know what I'm saying? This is what somebody is supposed to give it to them. Like, as if, this is social services. Like, emphasis on the service and helping. You know, this is not like entitlement. This is not like Social Security. You know what I'm saying? If you work
Right.
X amount of years, then you're supposed to get, you know, from the government. You know what I'm saying? This is not something that you paid into. You know what I'm saying? This is not a 401k retirement plan. This is something that's supposed to help. So people come in there feeling like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to get. I'm supposed to get, and it's so ill. It's such an ill dynamic because it's mostly, well, where I live at, it's mostly us, and we come in there with that mentality of dependency. You know what I'm saying? And it's at a young age. You know, I was just saying, see kids, man, 17, 18, just
I'm surprised you're not seeing them younger than that. Just because they know that you can't. There's no qualification whatsoever for them.
most of the ones that come in, they know the system. They know they got to be at least 17, 18 to come get it. As people learn to work the system, they'll come in younger, say they don't live with their parents anymore. You know what I'm saying? And they're on their own, but not so much. I'm seeing a lot of people my age like that. Well, of course, because the economy and people losing jobs and stuff like that. But I still see a lot of young women, you know, young brothers. It's not a big deal, you know, because it's there. I tell anybody, like, if you don't got no money, go get food stamps. You can purchase as much food you can get, you know, and you won't be struggling, you know. But it's a different element, you know, for different uh, segments of our community. That's the difference. But the discipline piece is important, you know what I'm saying? Because kids come in all day with us and just have no discipline. Just run ripshod over the parents, and no type of feel no way about it. And the parents have, you know, no type of embarrassment or, you know what I'm saying? Like they'll be in the intake unit and the kid wilding out and they just kind of like sit as if they numb to it, as if that this is what the child is supposed to do.
Yes,
You know?
they do. That is what the child is supposed to do. And in fact, you're not a good parent unless you spoil your child. It's a major difference when you go to the islands, you go to the UK, and the African communities here. The children, you know, run around like children, play like children. Oh God, that level of respect is a whole different thing. It's very, very different. I would, you know, I wanted to stay just to watch them. And they know that the little ones, they know that they're protected. Now you got a lot of gang problems, blah blah blah. But the little ones, what we're talking about, they are respectful. They know the boundaries, and they know that they're protected. And I say that they know that they're protected because the children are very friendly. People are very friendly. But they check to make sure that the parents are okay with you before they start bombarding you with questions and conversation. Once they know that you're cool with the parents, because the parents are the ones who protect, then they can come and converse with you and have some fun. Okay, but they make sure that that's straight first. You know, it's a whole nother animal when it comes to the children.
How would you teach a child to do that?
Excuse me?
How would you teach a child to do that?
To be
To
disciplined.
check with their parents first. How is that done?
Well, you know, 30 years ago, I would have said that was a dumb question. But in this reality, that's a perfectly sensible question.
Because I know my niece, she run up and talk to people and tell them my business and ask all these questions. And she doesn't wait to see if she has any adult around, whoever's watching her. She doesn't make sure she has their approval first. And we try to tell her, don't do that, you know what I'm saying? But she
She's
doesn't.
really got she's very like she's one of those children that are very innocent. You know what I'm saying? Very, very, very friendly. And when they see those, like when I first met your niece, you know what I'm saying? She was automatically like, hey, you know, because I interact with kids. You know, when I see kids, I get on their level and try to, you know, interact with them where they're at. And so when I did that, she just was like, you know, everything like there, like with me, and you know, her mom never even.
I'm such an old school. Like I was right. You know, we were told that. And then if you, the friendly child does it, you immediately pull them away. You know, when you do that repeatedly, and there are consequences. You know, so they will get it. But you have to also start doing that very young, because little children are like that.
Because I know I was shy. I didn't do that. But my mother also did tell me don't tell everybody don't talk to strangers and all that stuff. So
Sound design be like when people that they don't know see speak to them. First thing they do, they kind of like they get close to me, you know what I'm saying, and then they'll be like, you know what I'm saying, hey, you know what I'm saying, they don't really get into it. Like my youngest, my second youngest is kind of quiet. Like if somebody speaks to him, he'll get quiet. He'll kind of look at me and look down, you know, because I don't.
Listening.
Yeah, we never really, you know, I never really had to be like, you know, don't talk to strangers. You know what I'm saying? But it kind of.
It's also a problem if you have a child who is friendly with people, whether they are telling them stuff or just friendly with people, period. You can give them instruction as not being a direct parent, but it all depends upon what they're getting in the classroom and what they're getting at home.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the classroom, she's getting that.
Mm-hmm.
She's getting that. You go run to whoever. This is how Europeans are trained. It makes it easy for them to be with us, to take us, to train us, to do whatever they need to. I think it's also very much connected to neediness, where the media has taught our children to need to be at the center of everyone's attention. How many friends you have online. I want to be rich and famous. I want to be seen. The greatest thing that you could ever say to me is my name. You know, that kind of, when you have that, that's very difficult to reverse. That means that anybody who gives you some money, gives you a job, or gives you an opportunity, or what have you, then you run to them open arms because this is your friend. This is somebody, and they have us trained in this way. But that's very difficult to do. So when people talk about that to me, the 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 center of the response has to do with us creating African-centered communities that are safe, that are secure, that are protected. That doesn't mean that um, we alienate family that's respectful. I'll alienate family that's disrespectful of me being African. But that doesn't mean that we're alienating biological family. That just means that we are creating a sphere of protection around those who are us. And if those children are in that sphere, and all the parents are in agreement about the discipline, give or take a degree, and how the children are supposed to react, and the boundaries of those children, and who they don't need to talk to, and if they need to check with us, then you'll see a change. But it's got to be within that kind of community because all of these things impact friends, family, the media. You know, so within that circle, the media is going to be strictly regulated because they shouldn't be seeing shows where children just walking up to adults and everything is fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they shouldn't be watching these movies where or these TV shows where some girls on there talking about, yeah, I'm gonna marry my daddy. You know, these shouldn't be caught in any way because once it enters that one time, that's it. That's it. It's found fertile ground. That doesn't mean that child is wasted, but you can't get rid of that thought. You can't get rid of that energy.
Well, we're gonna get ready here.
Okay. You guys got it.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, you guys got a little work to do.
Right.
I got work tomorrow morning.
Hey, and I just want to say thank you, man, for being a part of yesterday's program.
Oh man, I enjoyed it.
Oh,
That was, I mean, it was a blessing
I'm crying
to
if I
see
can only get
that was
5
happening
minutes.
yesterday's
Please.
Take
Yeah,
March
well,
in
fortunately,
Atlanta.
tonight,
The people supported, you know, the Black August weekend, working with Solange and them. It's definitely been an
I
honor.
feel all right.
You know, we've been doing the festival in Richmond for
And
6
maybe
years,
when
and
you
see the
guys are
Atlanta
switching
community
off, you
come
can get a
out
little
and
sneak
support like yesterday with the type of energy.
because
It
Sister
definitely,
Michelin, you know, she's gonna be
definitely.
checking it back. So you're not driving, that's all good.
Yeah, so it's a nice steady flow.
I went outside and there was some cop driving around in his car trying to regulate traffic.
Yeah.
He apparently, you could see on his face, he was ticked off. He apparently got the impression you need to leave.
Yeah, right.
He drove right on out because that was one of the things I saw that I really liked. You see, the brothers, they weren't moving toward him, but they were standing there, and all their eyes were on him everywhere that car went. You know, they were standing there just. You don't know exactly what you're doing.
No. Well, Rudy better at telling you, but basically you're gonna get on 20 east to get to 85 north.
Okay, let me do that. Okay. I appreciate you. Okay. All right. You all know that you're welcome to the house. If you